second question. One of the main concerns for legalizing marijuana is the nation's youth. Do you think the youth of America will be negatively affected by this?
Of course, marijuana has, been shown to have different effects on memory loss, distorted perception, as well as the inability to think critically, which are all very important components in learning, especially in young children. And if the federal government does legalize marijuana, they will only be condoning lower test scores such as on the SAT or the ACT, which are very important for college admissions. And they will also have a higher dropout rate in high school. It has been shown that kids who smoke before the age of 18 are 4 times more likely to get really bad grades in high school, such as D's and F's, and they are also 2 times more likely to drop out of high school. And I believe that another implication that could occur is, based on how many car accidents there are already in teenagers within the first couple of years of their licenses. If you legalize marijuana and put it in their hands, it would be just like, condoning drunk driving for every teenager. They would be high, and I think that the car accident rate would definitely increase.
Well, there's lack of a solid answer whether it's harmful or not. And I don't really know right now, but I can assume that it won't. But it shouldn't be that big of a problem because it is very accessible to the youth even today, and maybe we should legalize it at a certain age, like as in alcohol or cigarettes. And this would still prevent the youth from purchasing it. This could also be a way to bring in huge amounts of money to the government revenue. And by at that time, I don't really know, I have any evidence that it will affect the population in general. So.
Okay. Third question. Should the legalization be a state matter or a federal matter?
Well, I'm not really sure why this question still exists because there are only 8 states in America that haven't adopted similar laws or the exact same law as the Federal Uniform Controlled Substance Act. Those 8 states include Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Maine, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. And this law drastically reduced the penalties for having marijuana for being, a controlled substance, for a Schedule I controlled substance. The penalties really have gone down in the past years. They reduced the penalty from a felony to a misdemeanor, and they reclassified marijuana as a hallucinogen instead of a narcotic. And another problem with having the states rule over it would be air travel. We would have to retrain and or hire new employees at every airport to have, a double baggage check. You'd have to make sure that you checked into certain security lines depending on which state you were traveling to. And it would just be a really big hassle, and people would not be happy with the longer lines at the airport, not to mention it is very costly. And, with as many airlines that are in bankruptcy today, I don't think that we can afford it right now.
Well, I think that legalization should be a federal matter. Like I said before, I don't know why marijuana is illegal anyways. But by legalizing this drug, we can have a $1 billion industry in the country that will contribute greatly to the government revenue.
Okay. Question 4. The policy on marijuana is nearly 80 years old, and the most recent update was about 40 years ago. Do you think this policy still applies to Americans today?
Well, of course it does. I mean, we don't just stop following laws just because they're old. We follow the Constitution, we follow the slavery laws. Why shouldn't we follow a law that's 80 years old when we follow a 200-year-old law? It just doesn't make sense to me that people would actually think that it doesn't apply. And the matter of the fact remains is that marijuana and or THC, depending on which circumstance you're talking about, whether natural or synthetic, is not FDA approved. Everything we put in our mouths and on our bodies, everything that we have is FDA approved, and it should remain that way. And it is still a Schedule I substance, which proves that it is not medicinally beneficial. So if we can't prove otherwise, then there's no reason for us to not abide by this law.
Well, I think that the policy on marijuana is old and needs much revision. This 80-year-old policy is formulating a strong racism displayed in the country. At the time the policy was made, it was targeted mainly against the Mexican Americans who brought it over with them to the U.S. and towards the jazz crowd who were mainly Black Americans. And truth be known, yellow journalism was used against these ethnic groups to control them. But by pairing marijuana with Black Americans and Mexican Americans, it was easy to sway the country against this drug. And since the legislation was passed largely due to this, journalism, we should strongly consider revising it. And during the congressional hearings regarding the criminalization of marijuana, Dr. Wordsworth of the American Medical Association testified that criminalizing marijuana would deny the world of potential medicine. And therefore, until we find a definite answer to the question that marijuana is harmful, we should lift this legislation. And like Dr. Wordsworth stated, it is potential medicine.